Hello and welcome to the Wilder Lincolnshire podcast from the Lincolnshire Wildlife Trust. I'm Melvin Pryor, out and about with Matthew Capper. Where are we, Matthew?
So we are right in the heart of Lincolnshire, and we're at a fabulous little place that probably not many people know about, Goslings Corner Wood. And this is an ancient woodland site. It's a site of special scientific interest, so SSSI as they're called. And we're in the heart of what is called the Lincolnshire limewoods.
And they're really key, aren't they? They are so important to maintain.
Yeah, so this is a particular type of woodland that is dominated by, as the name suggests, by lime. And in terms of a UK context, this is the highest concentration of lime wood in the whole of the UK. So it's really, really special.
Now, the original ancient woodland, when that was acquired by the Lincolnshire Wildlife Trust, it was actually quite landlocked. It was there on its own in the middle of fields, wasn't it?
Yeah, so we were very, very generously left this fantastic piece of woodland back in the late 1980s. And as you suggest, it didn't have any connectivity. We couldn't really get to it from the road very easily. But as you'll hear today, there's a real fantastic story of adding land, adding new habitat, adding connectivity, and also a really good story of just how legacies and people's support through legacy giving has allowed the Trust to create a fantastic piece of wildlife habitat.
Yeah, what you've got here now is you've got two areas that were fields that have turned into woodland areas by planting trees.
Yeah, and you'll meet Sophie in a minute, and I'm sure she'll tell you all about the hard work that goes into both creating and then actually maintaining and developing this kind of habitat. But it's a really, really special place and shows just how easily nature can recover if we give it a helping hand. Something
I didn't expect while we were here today, though, skylarks flying over. And was it fieldfares or redwings that we also saw?
Yeah, so the autumn and winter migrants are starting to arrive. We've had a bit of a run of easterly winds, so that's helped birds to come across the North Sea. There was a massive arrival of redwings on the coast. Just a couple of days ago, they had 28,000 redwings go over Gibraltar Point in just a few hours, which is just spectacular. And those birds are starting to move their way inland, so we had a flock of redwings go through. But the skylarks are starting to head gradually southwards, and they'll flock together for the winter. And they make a lovely sort of jingling little call. And so we've just been hearing that since we arrived here. It's a beautiful blue sky. And the sound of skylarks going over is really lovely.
Well, let's hope we can hear some of those during the course of the next few minutes as we catch up with Sophie in the car park at Goslings Corner Wood. What was the background to the Trust getting the wood?
Well, we were very kindly left some money, which allowed the Trust to buy the woodland. And then, because we couldn't access the wood, we were then given some more money, which is very generous of people, to purchase 2 meadows, which has then linked it with the nearby woodland and also allowed public access to become easier.
So what sort of woodland is it?
It's an ancient woodland. It's mainly oak with a small-leaved lime understory and lots of beautiful hazel coppice as well.
I'm just looking at the hedgerow area here with some sloes growing, and that's actually attracted a really rare species, hasn't it?
Yes, that's the brown hair-streak butterfly, which we're very proud to have here. It relies on blackthorn for its egg and caterpillar stage, and then also the adults heavily rely on the ash, and they spend most of their time very high up, so they're quite difficult to see the adults. And I've never actually seen an adult. I've only seen the eggs. They're a bit easier to see.
But what you have to do is you have to manage this as well, don't you?
Yes, it has to be managed because the butterflies are very particular. They only like very young blackthorn, so the fresh suckered blackthorn that is normally 1 to 2 years old, and they then overwinter as eggs. They come out, the little caterpillars enjoy their time on the blackthorn, and then obviously turn into the butterflies and then get to use the ash, which is very close by, so it's all convenient for the brown hair streak.
I mean, it seems perfect here. You've got that combination of the different plants and different shrubs. Have you had to sort of plant some of that, or is this here naturally as well?
This is here naturally. We did have a little bit of funding to add a little bit of extra blackthorn, but to be fair, it does so well on its own. Yeah, it's doing well. We have to manage it and we have to cut it, which is sometimes difficult because it's a sacrifice. So how we manage that is by cutting on rotation. So we only cut 1/3 of the blackthorn in a year, and some years we don't cut anything. But it does have to be managed, because if we never cut it, it would just grow over, and then we would lose the habitat, and we wouldn't have any of that young growth coming through that the butterflies like.
I did notice as I was driving to the car park area here, there were several roadside verges that were marked up with the Lincolnshire Wildlife Trust as well. And they're providing these corridors, which this hedge is providing a corridor up to the wood, isn't it?
It is, yeah, and it was a very important hedgerow corridor, because it's actually allowed dormice from Chambers Farm Wood which were released there, and they've naturally colonised within Goslings Corner Wood.
Oh, wow. So how far is Chambers from here then?
Not far. I mean, you can just see it across.
Oh, my goodness.
There's the farmers' fields, and then there's Chambers, which is a very large woodland compared to our woodland. But they would have been joined together at one point.
I'm just trying to imagine the little dormouse making his way across here, to be honest with you. Has that taken quite a while for that to happen?
I'm not sure how long it took. I think it was only a couple of years, I think, before they were found in the woodland.
And do they need particular habitat as well?
Yeah, they need the hazel, and specifically hazel that's coppiced is a lot more beneficial to them.
Let's talk a bit about the fields that were purchased after the woodland area, where we're standing and looking to our left at the moment. This area here, you called the plantation, it already looks really established.
It is very well established, yeah. It has grown well. It was planted in 2006. The tree species that were selected were chosen so they mirrored what was already in our SSI woodland.
So would lime have been planted in there as well?
Lime has been planted. There is some here, and you can see in the car park. So it's one of the first trees that you'll see.
So we've got that. We were talking a bit about a living legacy, and this is actually work that's going on here, and those people that have actually given money to the trust to do some of this work can actually see it changing and evolving, can't they?
That's it. Every year we're running a little project where we plant wildflowers of local provenance within the plantation woodland to try and boost what is already there, because obviously planting trees onto a field doesn't make it a woodland. It is original. It's just trees on grass. So humans, we're not always patient. So this is a way of speeding up what would naturally take hundreds and hundreds of years.
So what sort of flowers and plants are you putting in?
Bluebell is doing well. Primrose is doing really well. All the sort of classics, wild ramsons, which is also wild garlic, wood anemone. We've got wild strawberry in there as well. That's doing really well.
And what about your role then here, looking after the plantation? Is it generally making sure that everything is surviving, everything is growing? Do you replant any of the trees if they don't survive?
We haven't needed to replant, because generally with a plantation, you actually don't replant, you thin out, because trees are planted close together, but once they start growing, they need that space. So you can focus on which trees you want to prioritise. So obviously we can look at the oaks. We want them to mature and become veterans. So sometimes what you can do is clear around them to give them a chance to get away. You can take out ones that maybe are struggling, aren't doing as well.
I tell you what we'll do, we'll move on then from the plantation and the car park area, make our way down to the original woodland and have a look and see how different that is.
That sounds great.
Sophie, we're making our way towards the main Goslings Corner Wood. We're on the edge of the plantation at the moment. You were just sort of highlighting some of the limes that you're looking at here. Tell us a bit about the work you do.
So the small-leaved limes were planted in the plantation slightly after the main trees were planted, but they are also slower growing. So we have to help them out by thinning, which is a management technique where you remove larger trees to benefit the trees that you want to grow, which in this case is our small-leaved lime.
And the lime, small leaf, but it's actually quite a small tree.
It is at the moment, but they will be bigger eventually with our love and care, yes.
But what you've got here is a situation where you've got the other trees that were planted earlier shading the limes, aren't they?
They are shading them out, so that's why they're on my winter plan to be removed. and which will allow the limes to grow to their full potential.
Okay, looking over there, an even smaller lime, that's still got a protection around it. Is that important?
Yes, it's still got its protection on it to prevent things like deer, hare, rabbits, because they'll give it a little chew, and then they can eventually ring bark it, which will kill the tree off.
Got any winter jobs to do in the plantation?
Yes, thinning, as always, is a long-running job as I'm on my own. Obviously, I have to have someone with me. Finding someone is a bit of a challenge sometimes.
Okay, we need to get you an
I need some
assistant.
volunteers. Maybe you can come out.
Oh, yeah, so do you get volunteers to come and help you do this?
I do
sort of
get
thing?
volunteers, yeah. I've got a small group that come out with me once a month on a Friday.
Excellent. And have you sort of in your head got an idea as to which trees you will thin out at this stage?
Yeah, so normally what I'll do is I can go through with some tree marking paint and mark the ones that I want to sort of focus on that year.
So again, it'll open up the canopy and allow some of the lower plants to survive.
Yes, that's right, yeah.
Okay, well, let's carry on our wander. So, Sophie, we've walked through part of the plantation. We're on the edge now of Goslings Corner Wood. But there's an area here that's sort of been left to go wild on its own, hasn't it?
Yes, this is our natural regeneration area, and it gives a really clear example of the difference between a woodland that has created itself through nature and a woodland plantation that has been made by humans.
It's interesting because you get very much, when you're looking at the countryside nowadays, you get a wood, there's a fence, there's a field. There's very much a dividing line. Here we're going to get a bit of blurring of those lines, aren't we?
We've got that natural ecotone, which is the good word for what you just said.
Looking at the edge here, we've got bramble creeping in. We've got also, is it oak in the middle there?
Yep.
But a small oak that you said you didn't plant.
No, none of these medium oaks. I have not planted any of them. They have come from our friends, the jays and the squirrels.
Ah, OK. So, again, natural regeneration going on here. And what about the grassland and things growing through that as well? You just leave that?
Yep, we just leave it. We have to resist the urge to meddle here.
Coming through the plantation area, really quite surprised to see the variety of trees, and willow doing particularly well.
Yes, willow probably doing a little bit too well. So again, that's on my chopping list.
So you've got the plantation we've just walked through. To my right, then, looking at the original ancient woodland. How different is that to manage?
So we manage that with the traditional coppicing technique. The whole woodland is divided into coppice coops, and every 2 years we focus on a different coop and we coppice within that coop, and between 13 to 15 standard trees are left, so they're sort of ones that are allowed to grow to their full height.
And how much a responsibility is it to ensure that an ancient woodland continues?
It does feel like a lot of responsibility, but it is really beautiful to see, especially with this natural regeneration area, to see it becoming a woodland.
Yeah. I'm not going to find any dormice today, am I?
We probably won't find any, but they are there.
And what do? Do they hibernate over the winter?
They hibernate. We've got dormouse boxes which were put in by the Lincolnshire Dormouse Group, and they check them and keep an eye on them and do surveys on them.
I mean, it must be a wonderful place to work. And we came past a barn owl box earlier on. You were telling me a story of one of your favourite visits to the site.
Yes, I got here very early, one day, probably about 6:30 in the morning, and was just walking along the ride, enjoying the peace and the quiet. And a barn owl just flew straight across my head, didn't seem to even notice me. And it was so low and so close, I got an excellent view.
Oh, wonderful. And as we were walking here, we saw a deer in the distance, didn't we?
Yes, we get a lot of deer here. One of the issues is, obviously, they have no natural predators, so we have to be very aware when we're doing coppicing that the trees are not vulnerable to deers, because that's a time when they're throwing out the new shoots that the deers can come and eat all the precious leaves off them. So that's something that we monitor as well, to make sure that the coppice stalls are growing back healthy.
Looking back across, well, I just see the vehicles through in the car park across there now, but there's an open field area. So are you deliberately leaving that area now just as an open field?
Yep, these are our hay meadows. So they are cut for hay every year by a local farmer, and then they are aftermath grazed in the autumn by his sheep.
It's providing a different environment, isn't it?
Yeah, it's more habitat, it's more diversity within the woodland.
And I would imagine with the sheep going on and the sheep droppings and everything like that, that will again attract different sorts of nature and wildlife.
That's right. We don't put any kind of nitrogens or any man-made fertiliser. It's all just what the sheep leave behind.
Right in the heart of the ancient woodland now as we continue our wander around Goslings Corner Wood, and an area here that's recently been felled, hasn't it?
Yes, so this is our most recent coppice coop. You can see it does look quite extreme to a lot of people. It looks a bit scary, but it is regenerating. It's doing what it's supposed to do. We've got the big standard trees, which have now got space around them to grow strong. And
mainly oak are the big ones there?
We've got some oak and we've got some ash, which again, we're trying to leave the ash due to ash dieback, hoping that there may be some that are disease resistant. We've got the coppiced small-leaved lime, the coppice hazel, all throwing out nice green shoots there. And we've got dead wood on the ground. We've got brash piles, which again, that's great for insects, overwintering, birds, for nesting. And yeah, it's basically creating diverse height within the woodland.
Gorgeous sunny day today, really lovely autumn day. It means the sun is coming through. Now, if you hadn't done the work here, it would just be a dense canopy, wouldn't it?
It would be. Now you can see the light levels and you can see the difference as well, standing between the two coops, one that was cut probably 10 years ago and one that was cut this year. And this will allow, we'll have all of our beautiful bluebells coming up. They did really well in there actually this year. Insects will be enjoying it. They can be relaxing in the sunshine.
I haven't heard the phrase coop before. Is that a sort of a technical term for when you're looking at an area in a woodland like this?
Yeah, so the woodland is divided into coops.
Okay.
I can't remember exactly how many we've got. It's probably about 20 within this woodland, so they're all cut on rotation.
Just turning round, you get a different sort of feel here. We were talking about the dormouse and the fact that the dormice have actually come across some Chambers Farm wood. This is great habitat for them. That's why they've come, isn't it?
Yep, they're loving it. We've got all the hazel coppice that's regrown nice and strong, and we've got our dormouse boxes, which gives them a bit of a helping hand as well and allows them to be monitored.
How exciting is that for you to know you've got them here?
It's amazing, yeah. I'm going to have to make sure I get out and see them at one point. And I know they're here, but I haven't seen them.
That's your challenge.
That's my challenge for next year. That's a good plan.
Sophie telling us a bit more about Goslings Corner Wood. And Matthew, fascinating there, but hearing about the new nature that's being created here, both the dormouse that's come across from Chambers and also the rare butterfly as well.
Yeah, and brown hair streak are really, really particular. You know, you have to get that management right for them. And that is something that, you know, Sophie's obviously gone to great lengths to, you know, get relevant advice and consult with experts to make sure that we provide the right conditions. And it was really lovely, wasn't it? Just on the way back just now, we had a little bit of a search, and just in the new young vegetation, we actually found some brown hair streak eggs, which
tiny.
Was first for me. I know it sounds really, really nerdy, and it is very nerdy, but I'm really, really chuffed that we've actually seen brown hair streak eggs. That's a new one for me.
And I hadn't realised, okay, these tiny, tiny eggs, just in the little sort of crevice there on the side of the plant, they will now overwinter. They won't hatch until next spring, will they?
No, they've got to put it with all the conditions that nature's going to throw at it over the next few months. And then, yeah, that's going to be next year's new life. It's amazing, isn't it?
Really exciting. Hopefully, perhaps we'll come back next year and see some of the actual butterflies flying around as well.
Yeah, and Sam, who obviously edits the podcast, he's an incredible butterfly enthusiast. He's been setting out to see every species of butterfly in the UK, and he'd happily come with us next year and have a look round. So, yeah, that's definitely a date for the diary.
And the other thing I really would love to see, I know you've seen them yourself, we did see a dormouse box that was there. We didn't look inside, though, did we?
No, so you have to have a licence to be able to check the boxes for the dormice. But it's really just nice knowing that they're here. And as you say, that connectivity, the joining of habitats, so allowing that corridor where they've been able to move from the core population over at Chambers Farm to know that we've got them here That's really, really special.
We were talking about the fact that the legacy plays a big part, both in the acquiring of the ancient woodland, but also the fields and the plantation we've got next to. We're going to talk a bit more about that, aren't we?
Yeah, so I think what we'll do, we're only 20 minutes from Horncastle, so if you've got a little bit of extra time, we'll head over to our headquarters at Bannervanham House. Dave Bromwich, he's our head of reserves. He's, it's fair to say, been doing the job for a while. And I don't think there's anybody more invested in all of the nature reserves. We've got nearly 100 reserves across the county. He's the guy who's responsible for all of those sites, their acquisitions over the years, the development of them. And I think it'd be worth us going and have a little bit of a chat, and he can tell us a little bit more about how those legacies worked and how all of that sort of acquisition came about here.
Phone ahead and get them to put the kettle on.
Yeah, maybe a biscuit as well, maybe.
Oh, that'd be nice. Custard cream.
Custard cream. I'm not sure we've got custard. We might have bourbons.
That'll do.
Okay, deal.
Dave Bromwich, you obviously got the memo or the phone call to say, get the kettle on.
Yeah, tea's on, Melvin. Yeah, a cup of tea ready for you.
Look, we've been out and about this morning. We've been at Goslings Corner Wood. Great example there of both the ancient woodland but also the newer plantation. Tell us a bit more about the legacy of acquiring that sort of area.
Yeah, originally it was a woodland, privately owned woodland, but the family wanted to make sure it survived. And so they came to us and a deal was done to acquire the wood. So it was dedicated in our Lapwings magazine for earlier this year. There's a picture of Ted Smith there, and it was dedicated to the Leachman family, or George Leachman in particular.
It's absolutely wonderful, but of course it was landlocked really, wasn't it? No real access to get to it.
It was difficult, yeah. You had to go over a private field or through a farm track. So it did sit there. It was a remnant of the once extensive woodlands of the area, but it was a little survivor, wonderful little site with its wild garlic and all the other good things. So, yeah.
How common is it that you'll get something like that, a legacy, somebody wanting to pass on something like a woodland to the trust?
It's not uncommon. There is a slight difficulty with that in quite a lot of the areas are quite small, or perhaps people's cherished back gardens and that sort of thing. So it is difficult. It's very kind of people to think of us, but these big pieces are quite uncommon.
And what's happened since, of course, acquiring the ancient woodland, you've acquired the fields near to it, so you now have access.
One of our policies certainly is to try and buffer and extend reserves. That's a big thing with acquisitions. So that's been a really good example. It was a big piece of land that became available. It was old sheep pasture, and through a long process of committee, because people just wanted to put it all into woodland, some wanted to keep the fields as grassland. So as you saw on your visit, it's half and half. We've left some meadows and then the woodland around the sides.
Yeah, really fascinating. The plantation aspect, which we'll talk about in a moment, has grown up so quickly, but you've still got the field where you can cut hay.
Yes, the idea came from Little Scrubs Meadow, which is next door in the big woodlands, the Forestry Commission woodlands, where the Little Scrubs Meadow had survived, and that's a very cherished site. People go there for the butterflies. So we've kind of emulated that in a way. So it's the woodland wrapping around the meadow to try and get that mosaic habitat.
Yeah, and I mentioned the plantation side, and with that we can talk a little bit about living legacies, where you've got an area here that's being worked on and changed for the good.
Yeah, it's been a really very inspiring piece of work to do that. As we mentioned, the original Leachman donation, and as we acquired the extension, then another family that we've known very well for a long time, the Race family, sadly another death in the family, and there was a donation there which we used to buy the trees. The tree proportion of trees was measured on what was already existing in the woodland, so we were able to go to a local provenance supplier and buy the trees, and so that part of the nature reserve was then dedicated to the Race family. So again, another wonderful living legacy.
And it is important to get it right in what you're actually planting in the area, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah, it's critical. We have to take local provenance into account, the mix of species that we do, and the way it's planted, the timing of planting. Yeah, so you can't just come along and do it. There's a lot of thought as to what goes into that whole process.
Yeah, and Sophie in the conversation was talking about flower planting in the woodland area here. It's important again that it's natural wild plants that you're planting.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, just to take that back one, yeah, it's okay putting trees into grassland, but it's not a woodland. There's so many other component parts to that. You know, you've got to get the soils right and the flowers right and the shrub layer right. So yeah, trees is a great start to make your woodland, but there's other components. And so the wildflowers certainly, yes, are now things like Spanish bluebell and lots of other cultivated
We
plants.
don't want those.
Absolutely don't want those at all. No, so it's going to proper growers, proper seed source, a lot of research into the community that we need of the plants, the species mix, and then a lot of work planting at the right times, planting into the right conditions. So yeah, it's a lot of work goes into getting that balance.
And the lovely thing with that, Dave, is that, you know, when people come back in years to come, it's something to see there forever, really, isn't it?
Absolutely, it's the living legacy is the thing. If you come back and there's a picnic bench and it's going to deteriorate and it's a tiny spot, but if you come back and can feel the presence of your family member in the entire site, it's just a much better feeling. You can feel you've contributed to that whole element, and that's what we're really very excited about. Certainly with Goslings, the gentleman who came from America, who recently funded some of this flower work, he came back. George Leachman was his granddad. He came with his children from America to see the wood. And that connection spreading over that distance and over so many years is just a wonderful thing for the family. And it's great, and it's great for our biodiversity.
If people want to know more, Matthew, what's the best thing to do?
Yeah, well, I would say the important thing is if you're wanting to leave a legacy, or if you're wanting to come to us to talk about how to remember a loved one that sadly passed away, it's to come and have a chat with us. Because, as Dave is saying, the species that we put in, the work that we do, it's carefully managed. And, it's not as simple as just turning up with a spade and some, plants from the local garden centre, because actually you can inadvertently do more harm than good. It's about talking to us, and we will personalise the conversation. We take it incredibly seriously. It's a really amazing thing that people are doing when they're kind of talking to us about these sensitive things. So we will make it a bespoke conversation, and we can work out some way of remembering a loved one that actually does bring a place to life. And what we get back from people when they come is just how close to their loved ones they feel. And I think you feel much closer, as Dave says, a bench, yeah, it's lovely. But if you come and there's flowers, you kind of, the spirit of somebody is brought to life so much more through something like that. So come and talk to us. Have a look at the website, the number is on there. And we will do our best to have a conversation with anybody that wants to have a chat.
Thank you very much indeed. That's it for another Wilder Lincolnshire podcast from the Lincolnshire Wildlife Trust. Hope you've enjoyed it.